your latest exhibit was called Unsettled, and so much of the truth that you express in your art is actually quite disturbing or eerie, right? Even though it has that arresting quality. So I'm wondering, how do you, in light of what Dana said, sort of, what is the understanding of beauty that you bring to art, even as you're unpacking things that are eerie and sometimes even creepy?
Well, I think my life had become, my wife of many years died. That was a huge transition. My father died, who was my closest friend, than my mother. So it was a very unsettling time. And it was sort of unconscious the way it came out in the work. It really was the curator of the exhibition who really brought it out. I went in and thought, what the hell's going on here? This is kind of creepy. I think she overdid some things. But, I was unsettled. And I think as a painter, and I'm sure as a poet, the interesting thing about painting to me is it's so immediate. There are no editors or no publisher. There it is. It's and so that's what came out.
Well, it's easy to see the beauty in flowers. The greatest works of art, the most beautiful works of art, let's say Shakespeare's King Lear, where son turns on father, father on son, brother on brother, daughters on father, sister on sister. They take the most difficult truths that exist and show us how they have a larger hidden order. I think that paintings that are merely pretty are really only on the surface. It's these ones that show the troubling, puzzling aspects of existence, and reconciling that to our imagination and to our minds is really the greatest purpose of beauty. It's a way of seeing truths that we might not contemplate did beauty not lead us to them.
What I was sort of fascinated. Beauty, but what is moving? That's almost a different experience when you're moved by something. Well, and beauty, I guess, can move you, but when it makes you almost weep.
Yeah, but it makes you almost weep, but you still have to look at it. Then it's beautiful. So if it goes beyond mere pathos, and in a sense to say, well, I'm learning something from this. The sorrows that I feel, but I think what the purpose of art, or great art, is to reconcile us with the complex nature of our own experience. And let's start with the big one. We're all going to die. Mortality. It's at the center of so much art, of making us appreciate every moment that we're alive, knowing those things. So I think we're actually in agreement.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think with my father's work, for instance, some people say, well, it's so lonely and it's so sort of, spare and so forth.
Well, it's the austerity and the spareness of your father's work which allows it just to be gloriously beautiful. It's taking a scene. What beauty really does is take a scene which is not necessarily where you want to be, and showing us why it's important to be there, bringing you in there, making you want to linger in it. So anyway, it's but I think that which is one of the things that made the criticisms of because everybody, the art world felt he was too beautiful.
Yes, saccharine.
Yeah,
so
but not in the least. He's a very, an austere, almost philosophical painter in a lot of ways.
Well, it always fascinates. For instance, Frost. I don't know if you're an admirer of Frost, but on one level,
unreservedly,
Frost is old oaken bucket, is a horse and choosing the road. His things are terrifying if you really read them.
Yes,
don't you think?
Absolutely.
It's the combination of the beautiful, the pretty, and the.
Well, Frost. What's the most popular poem in the English language among undergraduates is Fire and Ice. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I know of fire, I'm missing it now. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I know of fire, I'm forgetting it. What? maybe what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, hate is also great and would suffice. So what people admire is a poem in which the world ends not once but twice in only 10 lines. I mean, you can't get any darker than that. Because there's no way. Because these both polarities are destructive, but that's the beauty of him. I mean, it allows us to make sense of our darkest thoughts.
Yes, doesn't it?
Jamie, I want to get back, Jamie and Dana, to kind of the topic of grief. And since Phyllis passed away, it seems like you've taken a lot of solace in silence, right? And even in solitude. And Dana, I know you also had the tragic experience of losing your son. And so I'm curious, as artists, how have you processed that grief? How has that influenced your work?
In my case, it just even my portrait of Linda Bean, I was so moved by that and really crushed by her death that, you look at the painting, he's grinning and all that, but there's a sadness. So that's all very important, I think. And the beauty is such a tough word because it's so misused and as you say, commodity and manufactured and so forth. But grief is a major part of it, I think.
Well, as you go forward as an artist, you have your life, and you respond naturally to those things in your life. And when you have, a transfiguring loss, you become a different artist. And so for me as a poet, having lost my son, it gave me a lifetime membership in a club I didn't want to join. But it unites you in a sense with grief of other people that have lost that, and it changes your sense of, it broadens your sympathy. My work became simpler and more emotional and more direct, I think, as an experience of that, because I felt a kind of commonality with everyone who had had a loss.
Fascinating.
Shifting gears a bit to the creative tension between sort of more traditional classical forms of whether it's art or poetry and more modern sort of innovative forms. Obviously, there's a lot of interest among sort of young conservative students. They feel like there's been an excess of sort of modern and postmodern art, and they want to sort of return ad fontes back to the sources, to a more classical approach. I'm wondering, in trying to perhaps correct that overcorrection towards sort of innovation and modernism, is there a way that we can get back to, sort of more objective standards of beauty and art that don't become just kitschy or preachy or sentimental? How do you see, I guess, in your own work, having done, art of both kinds, that tension playing out?
Well, that's the danger, I think. And I kept thinking just in architecture. Look at the Mai Lin, the Vietnam Memorial, which is that black slash in the ground that was so hated. And now we have the World War II Memorial, which looks like Albert Speer had designed. So it's, there's a perfect case where the modernism, I think, embodies the beauty, but everybody says things are dated, that they're kitsch. I don't worry about that. I think.
Well, I work in every technique that works for me. I write in free verse, I write metered verse that doesn't rhyme, I write rhyme, I do whatever. I let the poem decide the shape it wants to take. But saying that, I think it's important for us to recognize that postmodernism embodies an essential mistake. It tries to give us the idea of the thing rather than embody the thing in a new creation. It tries to communicate. Finally you end up with conceptual art where they just have a word down or they have a piece of garbage on the floor, and it's called America Today or whatever, where they don't do the work of the artist. Because what you have to do is to create something that speaks to people holistically rather than just as an analytical piece of communication. And I think that's why it's rather barren. And also why it appeals to academics, because they love to write a work that's is also a commentary on itself. But I think it doesn't move people. You have to engage it intellectually. It doesn't engage you emotionally, sensually. But I think you're right. I think the great mistake, of conservatives in the arts is they think they can just do the way it used to be done, rather than understanding every technique you use has to be reinvented out of your own life and your own time. You can learn lots and lots and lots about the past, but you've got to be dealing with your own reality.
Now, one other theme that I picked up in both of you is sort of this role of obsession, right? And Jamie, for you, it's, you follow a ballet dancer around for a year and a half and you sketch and paint him 100, 1,000 times in that period. Dana, I've heard you talk about how a single poem, one that won't hardly make you any money at all, you might spend 100 times rewriting it, right? So what is this role of, I don't think most people experience the world through obsessions of those nature. So what is the role in your own lives of sort of obsession in art, and how do you deal with that?
Well, you can call it an obsession, but it's a quest to do something that is as good as it possibly can be. And it's the joy of realizing something. Does the world need more bad poems? I don't think so. So that what you really try to do is do something that really works. And no matter how much trouble it takes, there's a tremendous joy in feeling you got it right.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the dance thing. That when I worked with Nureyev, the Russian dancer, we would leave the theater and whatnot. He'd leave his makeup on if it was a matinee, and he'd walk through the streets and with the street makeup, and people, of course, would stop in their tracks. To me, that was so moving, and so I started doing a work of that, and he was very bothered by it. He said, "No, that is not dance. That is not the art." And curiously, after his death, sort of freed me to go back and I think they're the more interesting things I did of him,
Well, no, your portraits are so telling of the inner lives as well as the exterior lives of these people. And the tension between the two, I mean, the Kennedy portrait is so much better than any other portrait of him, because you have some sense of an inner life there.
And it was hated when it was first seen.
Not anymore.
And now it's the national stamp of Ireland. It's so bizarre how things take on their own life.
Well, I mean, at any given moment, I think this is a phrase from Evelyn Waugh, the arts are dominated by ghastly good taste. And any real artist has got to discard ghastly good taste and go for the gusto. I mean, you can't write a poem full of emotion without risking someone calling it sentimental. But I want something to be bodied, to have blood in it, not to be pale and wan and cerebral.
Right.
Two more questions for you, and then we'll move on to our post-event reception. I think one of the big things we think about a lot is patronage in the arts. And you might think of back in the 19th century, the age of the robber barons. You at least had these regional titans, and they were sort of competing to outdo each other. Pittsburgh wanted the greatest train station or library or art museum or cathedral, and they were competing with, the titans in Detroit or these other cities. And there was sort of they were investing a lot of kind of capital in supporting the arts. And we've talked a lot, at least as conservatives, about there's so much focus on just the political victories that they've sort of lost sight of the culture, and there's a very poor, if not existent, sort of patronage network, at least with more right-leaning artists. But I think there's also problems with, on the left side of the spectrum with, if you think of many of the grants given out by the NEA or the NEH, and sort of the ways in which it can kind of just be given to these academic subcultures that don't really kind of connect to the public in a meaningful way. So how do you think about, if we want to achieve sort of that 100-year civilizational vision, how can we inspire philanthropists, but how can we also think structurally about how the patronage model needs to change?
Well,
you know,
sorry.
well, so 100 years is you just got the Wyeth family.
But I actually served on the National Council for a while, and I was very uncomfortable with giving grants to individual painters. I mean, it's kind of like the government saying, you're good and you're not good. I mean, theater was wonderful, ballet, I mean, the performing arts, but weren't you a little nervous about that?
We stopped it by the time I got there.
Did you really?
Yeah. I don't, I mean, look, I'm going to make, two things, but let's, first of all, in terms of the NEA, I don't think the NEA should support the individual creation of works of art. And I don't believe that for political reasons, although you don't really want a government, person saying that's a good artist, not so good. But I think we should support art in the communities. Give the symphony orchestra a grant to perform a new work of their choosing. Decentralize the decision. Let the artists make the decision, and do it in such a way that the entire community of both the performing artists and the audience have the benefit of the grant. The composer will still get his royalty. The playwright will still get his royalty. And so I'm a real believer in using governmental money to create civic art and arts education of the highest quality in a way that was spread more fairly. But I want to ask the first part of your question, which is much more important. America, despite all my criticisms of it, still has the most vibrant and various art culture of anywhere in the world. And that's because of private patronage. If we want to revive the American arts, don't look to Washington to do it. Put me in charge in Washington and give me lots of money. Don't look to Washington. I'll do the best I can, but I'm not going to be able, or anybody else is going to be able to do this. It's going to come from enlightened public patronage. A lot of it's going to come people focusing on improving their local area. It's going to come through cultural brokers, as it were, middlemen, middlewomen, in terms of who are brokering these money. And a little bit of money can make an enormous amount of change there versus just getting sucked up in the government and caught up in the bureaucracy. So if we are going to revive American culture, it's going to come from the individuals, from foundations, because that's what's worked in American culture in the past. And it's now the hard part is if you're looking from a conservative viewpoint, so many of our leading institutions, I think, have been locked up in self-defeating philosophies and ideologies. We're going to have to create, in some ways, a counterculture. We're going to have to create new institutions, universities, theater companies, presses, galleries, that do the things that are not being done by the mainstream. Mm-hmm. So, we have to build a counterculture. Every aspect of it. It's a big task, but we could, it could be done in 10, 20 years if the right people put their money and their energy behind it. We have a new generation of young conservatives that are drawn to the arts and culture. If we can give them meaningful employment, that alone will transform the future. I've seen the beginning of this happen in Catholic literary culture. 20 years ago, we were powerless and mute, and it's tiny bits of money have revived it and brought thousands of people into it.
Fascinating.
So last question, obviously ISI is all about educating students. So what advice would you give to a young student who wants to become the next Jamie Wyeth or Dana Gioia? How should they think about their career and their vocation as it relates to the art, but also providing for themselves and their family?
You're asking the two wrong people. What's the last part of formal education you've had? What was your last part of formal public education?
Oh my God, I was tutored. I never went to school. It was a rather unique situation. Yeah. So my suggestion to a young painter is just paint.
Yeah.
I mean,
Be born into a family of famous painters and paint. You know?
well,
It's pretty easy.
that helps, yes. Exactly. I mean, the tools were around, but I have a brother who ate the same scrambled eggs and bacon, and he had no interest in painting whatsoever. So it, it wasn't such the environment, but it was sort of a natural thing to do. But the only validity of art schools for painters is they may take somebody with an innate talent and make them work. I mean, painting, it's difficult. It's not easy, and you got to do it. And that's the only validity. Other than that, how can they possibly say, no, that's the wrong color, or that's the wrong line, It's very touchy. I don't know about poetry, but...
It's the same. I get people writing, once a week somebody writes me for advice, and they say, well, how can I do what you did, and this, that, and the other. And my first thing is, I couldn't do what I did again, because the world changed. If I did, if somebody did what I did, it wouldn't work now. And no two people have the same course. I mean, what you have to do, it's true of all spiritual life. You have to discern your vocation, discern your path, and then be willing to spend everything to get there. You buy it with your love and your time and your energy. And if you're not willing to do that, you're probably not in the right profession.
That's right.
So and everything I've done was considered a mistake when I was doing it. But it just felt right for me. So I think it's hard. I mean, you have to look in your own life and see what it is that motivates you and find a way of making it a reality in the world. Ray Bradbury once said to me, he says, do what you love and love what you do, and don't listen to anybody else. And I think that's probably good advice.
And on that note, we'll close. Let's give Dana and Jamie a round of applause.
Right.